Okay, so good morning, everyone, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to uncover some interesting insights into the print industry. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jim Lingenfelter, the current communications director here at John Roberts. We're very excited about today's topic and think it will add some real value to your business and your brand. I'd like to introduce our special guest today, Sandy Hubbard. She is a marketing strategist and knows the print industry extremely well. And for 40 years, she has been an advisor and a solid resource to clients in the print, publishing, and media industries. Sandy is also co-host of a very popular weekly hashtag print chat with Deborah Korn of the Print Media Center. And Deborah's also been a guest on our JR webinars. I've worked with Sandy for years, and she's very generous with her time and enjoys sharing her observations and experiences from the print field. I'm proud to have her on as my guest today for Thinking Outside the Mailbox. So without much more fanfare, Sandy, take the wheel.
All right, great. Thank you. I'm very honored to be here today, and I'm excited to see a lot of familiar faces in the room. So hey, everybody, some of you already know who I am from, I see some of my clients here, which is great. As Jim said, I am a marketing strategist for print and media companies. And how I normally do it is I work with the owners and the executive team on the master marketing strategy. So less on implementation. Usually we'll either bring in a team for that, or we'll work with the internal teams or train them. And then quite often we'll work with the internal sales and marketing teams to help them get some traction and be more effective. And especially with the pandemic, a lot of the teams are really struggling right now. So that's been a big focus for me. But today I'd just like to talk more about what's going on in the world, reality, and I know Jim has some questions for me.
Yeah, people have been talking around the print industry recently, and I thought I'd ask a question, Sandy, because not everyone knows how to handle this existing paper shortage, and it's new to many of us. So how do you deal with panicking customers, and what is the life expectancy of something like this?
Well, that's a complex question. You know, those of us, and I see a lot of you on the call who have been in the industry for as long as I have or longer, and we've seen paper shortages. And usually those shortages in the past have been caused by or influenced by the levers that I call them cartels. That's probably not a very nice word, but you know, that the mega companies will shut a mill, create a shortage. You know, it's a financial issue and so forth, but those kind of things, that still happens. But what we're dealing with right now with global supply chain issues, and we're also seeing this with ink and toner and all kinds of materials that go into the printing process. This isn't something that somebody behind a curtain somewhere can just throw a switch and say, all right, in 18 months, we'll be back online again and we will have paper. I mean, this is much more complex than that. I think one of the challenges from both the printer side and the print customer side is that print customers they're calling their printers, and they're also calling all the printers, and they're like, who has paper? And they're ready to pivot their job to whoever has an allocation at the moment. I think one of the, you know, obviously that's a problem for the printer. They don't want to lose a customer forever and or even for one project. And for the print customer, you know, your printer is used to dealing with you. They know what to watch for when your files come in. They know how to communicate with you so that you understand. So we don't want to be jumping all over the place. I think one of the helpful things is if your printer has good relationships with the mills, and they're getting their allocations promptly and or whenever they can, and they're paying their bills so they're not put to the end of the list, that kind of printer is going to have more clout. So, you know, I would if that's your printer, I would definitely stick with that person. But I think from the print buyer side, the strategic thing to do would be have a meeting with your salesperson, and they're probably freaking out too, and just say, let's sit down. Let's look at what's on the schedule seriously for as long out as you can project, because this isn't going to go away when the calendar year ends. Get it into a spreadsheet, what projects are coming up, what papers are available or likely to be available. Get paper samples, and not just a fancy sample with any old thing printed. Let's see some color bars. Let's see solid blacks. Let's see a grayscale, and really look at, will these alternative papers work in this situation? You want to feel them. You want to see what the show through is going to be. In my own experience, I went from, when I ran my magazine, I went from a 60-pound book to a 55-pound book. And I looked at all the options, but postal prices were one of the issues. So if you're going up in weight, that could potentially affect your mailing costs.
Mhm.
And if you're going down in weight and the customer says, this doesn't feel like what it feels cheaper, or it doesn't feel right, I mean, that's a perceptive issue that you have to keep in mind. So yeah, sit down with your salesperson, get it in a spreadsheet, communicate all those issues. If there are postal prices that are going to be part of the equation, get that in there, and stay in contact with them. Make sure they have all your ways to get a hold of you. If something comes up and they're going to have to make a substitution, that they're communicating with you as far in advance as possible. Get your monitors calibrated. If your printer has fingerprint in their press and can give you those settings, so that if you have to make a change and maybe like print on a paper that's brighter or bluer than you normally expect, that you can make those compensations, or you can talk to your printer and say, I'm looking at my screen and this is going to need some work, so that you're not caught unaware. So that's a lot to throw at you, but that would be my recommendation.
Well, I'm just curious, you're out in the field there a lot. What else are you seeing out there?
Well, like I mentioned, salespeople and marketing people are really struggling right now. The junior people and the new people are having a hard time with working in this kind of hybrid remote environment. So, in the past, when we worked with teams, I would go into the plant, I would tour, meet everybody, hold a sales meeting face to face with everybody, and develop that rapport so that we could kind of elevate together. It's challenging to try to do this remotely. I think it's also challenging. Obviously, we've had email for 30 years and social media for 20 years, but a lot of the salespeople still aren't using the tools that they have available to them. So, modern training, getting teams used to working with communication channels like maybe Slack or some place where they can talk to each other and share information and share files and so forth. That's a big part of what we do, is just getting the teams more effective. Once they're confident and doing well internally, then they do better when they go out and start facing customers.
Well, a lot of people that are here, here today are looking for new inspiration as well. Like, where do you go from inspiration, Sandy? Where's your,
it's really hard right now, isn't it? It's hard to, I still don't get out very much, so it's hard to go externally and get inspiration. I have some email newsletters that I find inspiring, and I belong to a Stanford group that is a kind of a creativity lab, and that's really fun. But I would have to just toot my own horn and say probably the number one place for me that motivates me to draw inspiration and also kind of feeds it back to the industry is print chat. Because every week for the last, since 2011 is when print chat started, but Deborah started running it a couple of years after that. But really for the last over 10 years, every week, we've gotten together with printers around the world. We've had fun conversations about the issues that are right in front of us. We've looked for inspiration in crazy places. We've come up with crazy made up campaigns to just get our ideas going. And so if you're interested in that kind of thing, we meet on LinkedIn every Wednesday. So, let's connect on LinkedIn and I'll just send you an invitation. But it's really a chance to see what other printers are doing. A lot of times printers aren't the best at using social media to put their samples out there and so forth. But if you ask, hey, what are you working on right now? That's cool. People will talk about that. So I think Print Chat's just a great place to get inspired and also just to feel camaraderie with other print people in the industry.
So, you and I have chatted in the past about how to promote and things like that on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Can you give us just a couple, high-end ideas of how to connect on LinkedIn? I know we're not experts, but at the same time.
Oh, I'm an expert. I can always talk about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, as I said, I'm not an expert, so please enlighten us.
Well, if you are a printer and you're not using LinkedIn, I would say get on it, fill out your profile completely. And the reason you want to do that is because LinkedIn is a machine.
Yeah.
And so when you signal to the machine that you want to play the game, it will promote you. And so that's a big part of it. If you're not letting the machine help you, you're missing probably 80% of the potential of the platform. The other thing is, get into some of these groups. Deborah Korn has a group called Print Production Professionals, and it has, I think, almost 120,000 members. And so one of the great things about being in a group that's that comprehensive is that you become one step closer to the people that you want to connect with. You're going to see them more frequently. They'll see you. It's a warm introduction almost, so that if you do invite someone to connect, they'll be like, oh, they're probably okay because we're in a group together. So I highly recommend that. You definitely want to be in a group that doesn't have spam or a lot of, pointless self-promotion. Really get in a place where people are talking about print. And yeah, I can't say enough for getting your profile filled out comprehensively. That's the main tip.
We have a question from Sarah, who's on here, asking, what marketing and printing trends are you seeing in the business-to-business space?
In the business-to-business space, one of the things that I think, you see it if you're looking for it, and you may not, and it may fly under your radar, but but catalogs, micro catalogs, I call them, but it would be anything under, say, 24 pages.
Yep.
On a nice stock, saddle stitched. It's going to go to a select group, your select mail list. So you're going to really drill down on what the content is, but it's highly effective. Depending on your paper choices, it's one of those things where you see somebody open these micro catalogs and they're like massaging the pages. They're like, oh my gosh, from the color choices, which are fresh and now and really geared to that demographic, the inclusivity in photos. So people are seeing others like them in the imagery, great creative layouts, and then a call to action. So, whether you have something, a blow-in or a stitch-in, or maybe one of the covers folds out and, you can perf that off and send it in for information, QR codes for interactivity. And, so it's great if there is a call to action, but literally getting your brand inside somebody's mailbox regularly is, it's just such an opportunity right now. And I know with the paper shortage, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, we can't do a multi-page thing. Our printer will let us print one page. But there are publication printers out there who your printer may have a relationship with, and a lot of times it's a completely different paper allocation. So there are opportunities there.
Good. Well, when you were talking about, you and I chatted about this, about the paper shortage, and now you've been in the business long enough to, you mentioned something like you've seen this before. You think that, can you foresee, the previous paper shortages, whether they're manufactured or real, are they, or did you see like a timeline or a time frame with it, a couple of years? I know this is asking you to predict how long this
Yeah,
is
no,
gonna
that's
last.
okay. I'll go out on a limb. Normally I would say a year and a half to start seeing normal allocations, and then you start seeing the slush with, which is why they try to control that. And it takes forever to fire up a plant and get it going again. But, a lot of the issues that we're seeing right now with, logistics, transportation, fuel prices, raw materials, even getting just what you need to make paper. And then, I think the normal things will happen, which is people will start buying up paper companies. Some mills won't make it, and those will probably get bought by PE. So you're going to see a lot of just business shifts that happen within that. And then, unfortunately, the printers are lower in that food chain, and then the end users are going to hopefully, be able to maneuver through all this. So, I still didn't give you a number, but let's
Well, that's
say
okay. That's okay.
3 years,
Max,
which is why you want to build that spreadsheet. If you're a customer and if you're a salesperson, you want to communicate with customers frequently. Send them an email newsletter every week if you have to.
Well, Sandy, there was a couple of people I couldn't be on today, but they did send me some questions, and one was from a marketing agency that said they'd been advocating for print, but then they're also asked to integrate with outside services, and alignment was an issue for them. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's really huge. If you're a small marketing agency, you probably have some core capabilities, and then you're bringing in external people to fill out the edges. In my own work, I have a lot of independent contractors that I work with, and we'll all work on a client together. And the client may say something like, well, we've talked about doing telemarketing. Do you know anybody? And so since I'm the point person, I'll have to go out and, ask who can we trust, and bring in this new person who hopefully has the right skills. And so, a busy marketing agency is trying to cover social media, SEO, pay-per-click, email marketing, all these different categories, and blog writing. And so I would just say the same thing that I would say to a sales team or an internal marketing team, which is set up a communications platform somewhere so that you can come together, deal with the time shifts and the virtual real-time elements of it, and find trustworthy people, even if it means they don't have all the skills. In this environment, I would say someone who's reliable, like they go right to the top of my list.
Yeah. So a couple of the other people that asked questions, there was a designer that asked me, a question. He said that he was getting very frustrated with all the software changes, and that team communication was an issue. And he was going to ask you how to handle that.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what they mean, but I mean, the software challenges are really hard. I mean, anytime you log on and there might be a different user interface, or there's an upgrade or something, I would definitely, as a designer, get into the vendor communities where you can get a lot of cross support. And let's say you're an Adobe user, I would attend like Adobe Max, where there's a lot of opportunities to meet other designers. I mean, that's hugely helpful because a lot of times you might be the only truly, I mean, I'm not to be insulting, but you might be the only creative person on the team. And it's really hard to not have anyone else who understands that you can't just be creative at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
So getting into those creative communities is really important. And then learning to advocate for yourself on your own team. You know, whether everyone's kind of technically on the same level as far as hierarchy. A lot of times the designers just kind of gets, you know, like, we don't understand what you do and we're just gonna push you over there and you don't get to make a decision or whatever. And so really push to be a part of the team, a decision maker, having the input and taking responsibility to communicate and not just let those decisions happen without you getting involved.
So the print buyer that had a question for you. So it's, luckily they were all in different markets, so I wrote them down so I could ask, because they said, and this is his words, our purchasing responsibility is not easy. So how do I make others understand what's going on in the background?
Yeah, that's really a similar thing with the designer, which is that people don't always understand what the purchasing or procurement person does and what their criteria are. And you know, not to make generalizations, but a lot of times, again, that person may not be too interested in participating in, say, a team meeting or sharing that information. I think that's one of the benefits of having a person like me come in, because I get them into the conversation. I somewhat understand what their challenges are, and we can talk about that, and really making the team understand how this all has to fit together. I think another person who's crucial to the team and often doesn't get included is the operations manager. They think of them as, you know, out there, it doesn't really affect us, but that person has such a macro view of what's possible and often doesn't get asked. And we always brought the operations managers in my client meetings. They could tell you, hey, here's an opportunity here, or we've got material on the floor, especially if it, you know, in that particular instance, it was a wide format company. It's like, you know, we can push this, or we've got partnerships with these people and we've got trucks coming in. They see so much and they rarely get asked their opinion. So they're a great resource. And so are the purchasing people. They know, they're on the phone, they're talking to usually other printers, they're talking to suppliers in all kind areas that, you know, the marketing and sales teams don't see. They have a view of reality that's really important to getting to your understanding of what's possible.
Okay, so as we're getting to the end of this, I was curious if there's any other questions you can put going into the chat below and ask some questions for Sandy. But the other thing, while you're thinking of questions for her, you mentioned the prequel to the meeting here today, you said to me, and I wrote it down, is that speed is important to getting solutions for your teams. Can you expound on that a little bit while people are coming up with some questions for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think one of the things is people will overthink things, and there's just not time for that right now. And I see my friend Rock Lamont is on the call, and he and I always talk about this. I mean, you have to measure risk and reward. You have to evaluate, if I create a minimum viable product, can I get it out ahead of the competition? What's that going to look like? And a lot of times in a corporation, innovation, you know, we say we want innovation, but it's really very risky for the company. So, you know, when you have someone like me come in, we're going to talk about how can we create kind of a sprint where we can create something, in a time frame, usually a month. Get it out there, get it in front of customers, get some feedback, talk amongst ourselves on how it went and how we can improve. That's month one. Now month two, okay, let's get another product out there. We just got some immediate lessons on how it went. It's still fresh in our memory. Let's create again, create again, create again. There's little penalty in our world right now for just getting things going, you know.
Mhm. So our mutual friend Rock Lamana has asked a question. He said, to Sandy, is long term, are people hopeful about their employer that leadership and culture is sustainable?
Wow, that's just an awesome question, and that is huge right now. If employers have not set a very good groundwork for their employees to trust them, and as Rock and I always say, I mean, you have to walk the talk. You can't just say, hey, trust me, or, you know, use a bunch of verbiage. I mean, you have to put your money where your mouth is. And if they didn't do it during the pandemic with how things flowed, then they have to do it right now. And, you know, when you're looking at the possibility of a lot of companies not making it in the next couple of years and either being bought or sold or going out of business, I mean, employees know much more than you think. They are watching everything. They are skittish right now. And, you know, another great reason to be on LinkedIn, people are moving. They are watching for opportunities at better companies. They are getting their resumes out there and making connections and leveling up their careers. So if you're not the place to be, if you're not the most desirable place for your employees to be working, I would make that the number one priority. And that's such a great question because everything else flows from that.
All right, any other questions? So let's talk about, you've had some, you and I have chatted and we've chatted about John Roberts and their stability and longevity during the paper crisis. We had some, again, pre-meeting discussions. Can you talk to, what you've learned about John Roberts and our, the stability and longevity of the company here? I mean, I know it's been a very short relationship, but I know you did your homework, so.
Yeah, well, I think any company that, like I said, has a good reputation and has good relationships with the mills. Obviously, if you're a large printer, you're going to be working on your allocations directly with the mills. You're also going to have strategic relationships with others. You may be sharing allocations or communicating with other printers so that you can get what you need and they can get what they need. I would say any large strategic printer is hopefully paying their bills on time again so that they can be receiving their allocations promptly. And a longstanding company has been through this before, so even though this one looks different, they also know the right questions to ask. They know where they can push, where they can call in favors, and again, that's experience, that's longevity. And I'm just going to say, really, for any large, high quality printer who's been around for a while, they're going to be well equipped to deal with this situation.
Okay, that was a great answer. You could have just substituted John Roberts in for big printer every time.
Right. You can dub that out later, right?
When I was doing a mental checklist, and you were actually hitting all of the points that I wanted to make, so I don't have to make them now. So, are there any more questions? We can finish up here. If not, that's fine. So anyway, thank you, Sandy, for scratching the surface today with your print acumen and sharing your acquired wisdom with all of us. It's people like you that will keep our industry alive and help print thrive.
Ah,
So if you'd like to connect with Sandy on LinkedIn, just look under, I'll let you say how to get a hold of yourself on LinkedIn.
yeah,
So,
I hope I'm the top Sandy Hubbard that floats to the top when you search me, but you can also find me under Sandy Hubbard Publisher, because that was 22 years of my life was publishing a magazine for the print industry.
and
So
that'll connect you pretty quick to LinkedIn.
yeah.
All right. Well, and thank everyone. I thank all of you for joining us. Today's recording will be made available shortly, and there will be a brief survey to fill out. So please take the time to complete it. It's very short, and because we want to really continue this educational series with topics that are important to all of you. So we'll be in touch for the next Think Outside the Box webinar. So until then, do like Sandy does and help print thrive.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.